Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Conversations from Stritch. It's wonderful to be with you this morning. I must say that getting back on campus again today and a couple times this week, it's been really great to see the number of students and faculty back on campus. We have our RAs doing their training and some people from ministry that are also doing training. And so it's been really great to see more people on campus, and now we are really only a week and a half away from the first day of classes, and move-in is next week. So we're here to kind of continue the conversation around both what is going on campus. Today we will be talking about enrollment and how enrollment is going in terms of students returning, who's returning, how those numbers are looking. But as we get started today, we've received a few questions internally over the week, and I wanted to address in a generalized way, and then turn it over to Dr. Sint, who grateful for you joining me again today, Chris. And these questions tend to revolve around I guess I'd put it in this way. Are we watching what's going on with other universities? And I guess what I want to say very clearly to that is, yes, we are. We are aware of what is being reported in the news around places like UNC and Notre Dame and Michigan State. So we're aware that some schools have started their classes. Some people started on Monday this week, and that after a period of time have realized that they either need to take a break from hybrid learning, which Notre Dame did, or to go fully online for the semester. We remain committed to the model that we've been working on all summer, so a hybrid model in which many of our classes are delivered in an online format, but that for the majority of our undergraduate students, they will have one or two or three of their classes in a hybrid model in which they come, once a week. And Dr. Sint can talk more about that. We've talked about it this summer. But I just want all of our families, our faculty and staff to be aware that we are paying attention to our own community and what's going on here on campus, as we have really what are now relatively small numbers coming back to campus, but more and more of our employees who have been working remotely, and more of our students coming back. And that the other thing that I want to say is that like all these other campuses, we have had cases of COVID-19, and we will continue to have cases, and probably a rising number of cases as we have moved from having 300 or 400 people a week on campus to 3,000 or 4,000 people a week on campus. It is expected, and in our current climate, normal. And the last thing I'll say, and then I want to turn it over to Chris, is that all of us, I hope, are continuing to abide by the guidelines of the CDC and the IDPH, and the way in which Illinois and other states have tried to address this by really focusing on the basics. Wearing your mask, staying 6 feet apart, washing your hands regularly. And in that being done, we are still seeing in our county and our region in Illinois about a 6% positivity rate of tests. And so, so that rate is something that we pay attention to because we're paying attention to the Illinois guidelines. But 0 cases is not something that we're going to see at Lewis over the next month. And so we just want to be aware that there are going to be some cases, but we have put together a great number of mitigation strategies that we've talked about on other shows. So, Chris, I don't know if you have any kind of response or reaction to that as a kind of starting point, which is really a general reaction to some of the questions we received over the week.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Great to be here with you. I really appreciate that summary. I think it was quite comprehensive, and I will I want to kind of drill down on a couple of the things that you mentioned. But before I get to some of the specifics, I think maybe the only thing that I'm reading intensely in the news about that you didn't mention is testing. We talked about testing last week, and we are following the CDC guidelines, and we quoted those. I quoted those in my email last week, and I also we talked about that last week with Lori Forbear, our Director of Health Sciences. But there is, it's probably the most contested area in terms of the research, the effectiveness, the advice from researchers and epidemiologists in connection to the CDC or not in connection to the CDC. So I just want everyone to know we're very, very aware of that. We are working with Will County to do testing. We are doing testing, but we will probably have a much more comprehensive description of all the testing we're doing in the days to come, because we are learning a lot from what we're reading and talking with people about. Maybe I'll just continue to talk about some of these issues, and then I have some other unrelated reminders. So first of all, a reminder of what we shared last week around the COVID-19 hotline. And I think we'll show the contact information on the screen for that. Please contact it as soon as possible if you have tested positive or have been told by a healthcare provider that you are suspected to be positive. And our hotline team will respond quickly to your notification to the hotline. Also, like we said last week, if there are any questions about reporting, about what you should do if you have symptoms and so on, please call the hotline or call our health services department. We have also put on our Return to Campus website a positive case tracker. The president mentioned we do have cases on campus. The tracker is our way of communicating that on a weekly basis. It'll have the historical record of all the cases that we have had. We're tracking, particularly as a service to the community, or as a way of communicating generally to the community how it's going on campus around cases, positive cases that are connected to people who have been on campus or one of our campuses in the 2 weeks prior to the positive test. We're obviously tracking many more dimensions in terms of our decision making, but that is the way we're communicating publicly about positive tests. I want to say that this is our way for the community to be informed. Confidentiality laws prevent us from disclosing specific information about cases, and so we're trying to kind of thread that needle between maintaining confidentiality and informing our community about how the coronavirus is exhibiting itself in our community. The other thing I would say is again, we talked about last week, but if you are on campus, you will be informed if you are connected to a positive case. We're talking about this a lot right now, and so we're not showing the tracker because we're going to move on to other things quickly, but we have had one positive case this week to the previous week, so just to give you a sense of scale. As the president said, though, we fully expect those numbers to go up as more people come onto campus, more people connect to the hotline, and we will continue to see cases through the beginning of the fall semester, we're sure. And at this point, the tracker is one of those ways of determining not only the number of cases in our community, but also the knowledge that we have about the cases in our community, and our ability to respond to them.
So before we move on to other things, can I just kind of comment on this and ask a follow-up, Chris? So,
of course.
So just for people that are out there, you've said this, but I think some concrete examples because of just what people might understand. So again, the scope of the Lewis community is about 7,000 people, employees and students all in. Many of those students, and more of them this fall, will be fully online in terms of the delivery of their education. And we've always had a significant number of online students. And some of our employees will remain in a remote context. And I want to try to connect the hotline and then the tracker. So, and you said all this, but like I said, I feel like, so we want people who are a part of our community who test positive to call the hotline, regardless of whether they're working remotely or on campus.
Correct, yes.
Right, so the hotline is there for, if you get notified by a contact tracer of a suspected case, if you do test positive and you get your result, we want to hear from you because we want to know who in our community is positive for the virus. But if you are an employee who has worked remotely since March 20th and have not been on campus for the last 4.5 months, and you call us on the hotline and say, I've tested positive, you will not end up in the tracker. Correct? Because you haven't been on campus and you're not, in some sense, what we're trying to do with the tracker is give people the sense of how many people that are actually on our campuses are testing positive, and whether that number, how that number changes over time, just so people have a sense of that. But there will be people who really, though they're directly connected and play an important role in delivering the education, or they're a student who, you know, lives on the North Shore of Chicago and is doing a master's degree in cybersecurity, but doing it fully online. We want to know that they have COVID, but they aren't impacting the kind of ability to transmit the virus at the Romeoville campus or at the Oak Brook campus, because they never come to those locations. Is
Right.
that?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And
I just think, you know, for people to appreciate what we want to share with you, the information that's relevant, but we also want you to share with us, even if you don't think, well, that's not important because I never come to campus.
Exactly.
Right. So we're trying to, again, thread that needle as well.
That's right. I don't really have anything to add to that.
That's great. I just following up.
I really only have one other announcement before we introduce our guest, which is that I will send an email out today with several links to Welcome Week events. We talked a bit about that last week, but today we will kind of finalize the announcements, and I think students will get some emails directly with some both virtual and physically distanced Welcome Week events for next week. So we want you to get that information and to start looking forward to the engagement in our community that we have planned for everyone next week. So without waiting further, we would like to introduce Ray Kennelly, who is our Vice President for Enrollment and Strategic Planning. Hello, Ray. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ray. Thanks for joining us.
So we're looking
Glad
forward.
to be here.
Yeah, we're looking forward to an update on how our student body is shaping up for the fall. And so you can take it away when you're ready.
Yeah, thanks. And you know, in preparing my comments this morning, it's given me a chance to kind of reflect on, you know, we're essentially at 6 months of sort of going through this virtual experience that came upon us and really hit us at a time when a lot of the recruitment processes are really in full swing. You know, the late spring and into the summer is a high time for yield activity, final college decisions, and students and families working together to make their plans for the fall. So it's been an incredible effort over these few months by the leadership in enrollment management, the staff in enrollment management, and all of our colleagues around the campus, faculty, program directors, and deans who've really have pulled together in an extraordinary way to help us work through that and continue to communicate and work with students, work with parents, to achieve our enrollment outcomes. And so I have a couple of slides I'd like to show just to kind of focus some of my comments. You know, as we go back to March, you know, one of the things that we really had to do from an enrollment perspective was really begin to shift what would have been in-person campus recruitment events to a virtual environment. And so 6 months later, we are all tremendously skilled in the use of WebEx and Zoom and other modes to communicate virtually with our prospective students across all levels. And so there was so much effort and energy expended to take scheduled open houses for the spring and move them into a virtual format. We established and worked with faculty and deans across the university to hold a number of program-specific information sessions. Normally in April, we would hold our Future Flyer event for high school seniors that were making their final decision for the fall. We moved all of those yield events to virtual spaces. Everything from smaller chat rooms with students that they could get to know each other and get to know some of their classmates, other opportunities to answer specific questions, follow-up financial aid sessions, and then most recently through the summer, the SOAR orientation, advising, and registration sessions were all moved into an online format. And in fact, we have a SOAR session happening pretty much simultaneously to this time that we're here in right now. So we move ahead to the next slide. So all of that has really helped support the ongoing work we needed to do to keep sort of the enrollment process moving forward. Some of the other things that occurred as a result of the COVID restrictions, we had a high number of families expressing interest in just wanting to see the campus. They understood the restrictions, they understood the limitations, but there was a lot of families contacting us saying, could we just visibly see the Lewis campus? And so we worked with a number of people internally to establish a campus driving tour, a 12-stop self-guided tour with narration to provide an opportunity to at least see and experience the campus, albeit just from your car, but we felt it was better than not allowing the opportunity. As we got closer to July, we were able, with the Restore Illinois plan moving forward, we were able to begin to allow some highly structured in-person visits. These have been individual families, one at a time, in a very organized way and using all of the precautions and preparations involved in that. We've hosted about 120 students in that manner since the early part of July, which has also been very well received by families who once again wanted to see Lewis in a little bit closer way before making final decision. And we joined with a lot of other universities around the country in just being more relaxed around deadlines, most notably the May 1st enrollment deposit deadline, but I know across all of our programs, graduate programs, adult, transfer, undergraduate, we've just operated in a much more fashion to be responsive to students, knowing that they may need a little bit more time to finalize a application, to get their financial aid information submitted, or to take action on some of the other enrollment activities. What's been talked about on conversations from Stritch before, but I think it bears repeating again, is that the COVID-19 Emergency Relief Fund has also been incredibly instrumental in our enrollment progress for the fall. And this fund was established to support students whose families experienced income loss due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It could be a full job loss, it could be lost wages, lost hours that resulted in lost wages. And families and students across all levels have been able to submit an application to appeal for an award through that fund. To date, we have granted over 500 scholarships for the coming academic year through that fund. We continue to receive requests. We continue to review and process requests. So I would once again just like to restate, for any student or family who is experiencing direct income loss due to COVID and is concerned about their ability to be able to afford Lewis in this coming year, we would encourage them to continue to submit applications for that relief fund. And then finally, and this is a little bit more toward the future year, the fall 21, we've joined with the overwhelming majority of four-year institutions across the country in adopting a test optional policy for fall 21. This is in response to the situation that the testing services, both ACT and SAT, have found themselves in, with the inability to hold scheduled tests going back to the spring, summer, and into the fall. So there is a significant number of the rising high school seniors across the country who will not have had the opportunity to actually sit for a standardized test. And like I said, most institutions around the country were working to not penalize students for something they have no direct control over. So the fact that they have not been given the opportunity to take a standardized test, we don't want to hold them accountable for that and jeopardize their ability to apply for admission to Lewis. And so once again, the overwhelming majority of four-year institutions across the country have adopted that policy. But to move on to the next couple of slides, and this is a little bit more of the detail that I think people will be interested in hearing. And I'm going to talk quickly about summer and spend a little bit more time about fall. But I think we all felt a sense of encouragement. Maybe you would call it a little bit of relief at how the summer enrollment turned out. You know, that in many respects was sort of the first enrollment moment after COVID, where we could sort of see how our students going to react to, in this case, our summer classes entirely being moved to an online format. And I just think what's really encouraging and speaks so highly of the quality of the Lewis programs and the work we do with our students and the tenacity of our students to want to continue to move forward. As you can see, we essentially replicated the exact same headcount numbers we had from the prior summer. So we did not really see in our summer enrollment any real drop off or retrenchment in our enrollment this year, which was very encouraging overall. As we look ahead to the fall, which is the next slide, and I just want to talk through this so that the data that are appearing here is understandable. If you look in the far left-hand column, the information shared there is the original projection for head count that we established pre-COVID. So this is based on our analysis of the upcoming expected graduating number of students. It takes into account the retention rates by different categories of students, and it factors in our projected number of new students, and it forms the basis of our headcount projection and eventual revenue projection. And as you can see here, the original projection totaled 6,390 headcount, essentially a flat year-over-year projection with fall 19. Post-COVID, when we started to do some deeper analysis and we started to look at what might the ramifications of the pandemic be on enrollment, we did see some early trends in some of our new student projections and some concerns, mild concerns, but concerns in our retention of full-time undergraduates where we felt it was necessary to adjust that target. So we did revise that projection downward by approximately 100 students, a little bit under 100 students, to account for what we might anticipate as some enrollment loss due to the COVID pandemic and the implications it was having. We did not see that in the part-time or graduate numbers, and so we kept those numbers and those targets. We felt like those targets were still appropriate. So we developed a revised projection of 6,294 students post-COVID, and the registrations are the active registrations that we have to date as of this morning, and gives you a sense of where we are up against the revised projection. So for the full-time undergraduate category, we are within 94 students of achieving the revised projection of 3,156. As you look at these numbers, you may feel like, where does that relate to our eventual outcome? All of our numbers there would suggest we are on the trajectory for that revised projection. As I mentioned, we have a SOAR happening today, so we'll see some registration gain overnight. We've always been an institution that even though classes are starting in roughly 10 days, we do register a large number of students over these continuing 10 days. And so at this point, we do project that that revised projection is close to where we are going to end up, albeit that in this environment, as I talk to my enrollment colleagues around the country, I think everyone is appropriately cautious that there are things occurring on a near daily basis that can impact or influence these numbers eventually. But yeah, and I'm sorry, Dave.
No, I was just gonna, ask some, well, make a couple comments. First of all, such gratitude to you and your colleagues, and really not just the colleagues in admissions and financial aid and the registrar's office who have helped people to understand what their course schedule will be like in the fall as for our returning students, but really to all our faculty, all of our staff, our coaches who've really partnered with you to continue to tell the Lewis story. I think it's really quite, the numbers are quite remarkable and very positive in the sense that, as you said at the beginning, the spring semester of 2020, people had no idea we were going to have a COVID pandemic, and so they went fully online with not knowing that was going to happen to them, and completed the semester. Then the summer happened, and they were told well before they registered that it was going to be fully online, and we still had, just basically the same as what we'd had before. And then if you look at this fall, I mean, what I think you're saying to the community with those numbers is we'll still have a significant number of registrations for grad and transfers and part-time, and that those numbers are probably going to hit their budget target. And we've modified to say that we believe 100 out of basically those 3,000, so about 3% of our full-time undergrads, for a whole host of reasons, will not be joining us at the rate that we thought that they would. And I think that it speaks to the quality of the Lewis experience, and my hope is their sense that faculty at Lewis worked really hard in the spring and summer to modify the curriculum into an online fashion, and that whether students are taking 1 or 2 online classes and 3 hybrid classes, they know that the experience in the classroom is still going to be great, and that's why the numbers are at 97%. I mean, it's a testament to the work that your team has done, but also the work that the academic side of the house has done. Are there any, I guess, any things in terms of, and I guess I'm speaking now, especially around, the faculty and staff that are watching. You said things are shifting all the time. These numbers are today's numbers, but tomorrow's numbers. I mean, I guess for those people that don't do this every day like you and I do, do you think tomorrow's numbers are going to be higher than today's or lower than today's? I mean, you said this is just this morning's, but where is this moving in terms of the numbers? And obviously, we have a whole nother week next week.
Yeah, no, from this point forward until classes start, we should see gains in our registered students. And so it's always a little nerve-wracking, but at the same time, every year we do have a number of students that complete their registration for the fall semester through that final week leading up to classes. And so, with today's SOAR, we have about 40 plus students, new freshmen and transfer students here today. So all of those registrations will be processed today, but we also continue to see day over day increases in our returning student, our graduate and adult student registration. So, and that will continue for the next 10 days.
And we wanted to continue. So, to just go into that a little bit, the offices are open both virtually and, you can call and set up an appointment to come in if you need to change your classes. You were going to take chemistry and now you want to take, biology instead. But if you haven't registered yet at all and you want to register, there's still an opportunity to get in touch with admissions, or maybe you had already applied, but you just were going back and forth and you are now deciding, I do want to go back to school or start school. All of those offices are open, both, like I said, you can talk online, you can call by phone. And this is, again, both for potentially, changing classes. You might have seen in the schedule that a class that you thought was going to be hybrid is now online, and maybe you want to switch to a different section that is hybrid, or it might be the reverse. You realize now, and Chris, maybe you could address a little bit of this, because we're talking about this registration stuff. Could you just talk a little bit about what a student is experiencing in terms of their schedule? I know they received it all, but are there situations where a student, when they registered for classes last May, maybe over the summer, a class has turned into an online class? Do they have the ability to reach out to the registrar's office and, and I guess I'm thinking of something like, I'm a returning sophomore and I have to take a history class. Some of those history classes are offered online, some of them are offered in hybrid, but the class I was in that I registered for initially is now online. Can I switch to a hybrid class if there's still a seat available? And how does that, I mean, I know this is normal, basic stuff, but because we're in a different model and people aren't just walking onto campus, give me a sense of where we're at with that.
Okay, that type of switching is normal and regular, where
Right.
people can just switch sections that they're enrolled in at any time. But now you're mentioning or bringing into the equation the type of modality, or whether it's online or blended. And so, I don't think we can guarantee in every single case that there are options, but there we strongly encourage students who are thinking about making a switch in either direction to talk to their advisor, to call the registrar's office, to talk to people who can help them in case and in other areas where we do have people working hard on giving advice about how to adjust schedules. I guess maybe I'll just use this as an opportunity to say something else, which is, because I think it's coming through a little bit in the questions, and you asked me about it earlier and I didn't really answer it. I guess we just want to re-emphasize how much we are thinking about the schedule, how much we are, when we said we're paying attention to the news earlier, we are very much thinking about what all of our options are in terms of how we're delivering our educational experience. And I'll just repeat something, you know, that we've been saying every week for 15 weeks, which is that we've built a model that is highly flexible. And so we, you know, we sometimes use this shorthand of doing hybrid education. You just did it, by the way, about a minute ago. And that's maybe gives people the wrong impression. You know, about almost 40% of our classes have moved online you know, with a beginning of about 25% and moved slowly over the course of the summer as we've been paying attention to the information and paying attention to what students want. And that we have about, you know, maybe 30% of our classes will be in that blended format where people are going once a week. So those classes, those blended classes, are meeting in person you know, in almost all cases, 1/3 of the regular amount of time. And then in addition to that, about 40 or 45% of our classes, either experiential ones or fully online ones, will be virtual. And then we have, you know, 15 or so % that are experiential classes, labs and things like that, that are in person on campus.
So can I just ask on that specific thing? It may seem obvious to people that are watching us, but I think there might be some people, because we keep getting these questions about, you know, why are you continuing to deliver some in person at all? So the reduction down to 1 day a week, and I know, you know, because it might not be the same people. 8 weeks ago, Dr. Ann Rapp was on and explaining this somewhat. But part of it is just like what's happening in a restaurant, where they remove tables and they have less people in the restaurant, but people still want to go to a restaurant. There are just fewer people. Our campus will have fewer people every day, right? Because instead of me coming to class Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I might only come to class Monday. And because now 40% of our classes are online, maybe only 3 of my classes are actually meeting 1 day a week, because 2 of them are fully online. So the kind of volume of students that will be on campus, which will mean that we'll be able to it's much easier for us to stay 6 feet apart, right? Our hallways are less crowded, our sidewalks are less crowded. It's really a desire, I think, on the part of the university to increase the distance between people by having less people on campus. Is that, I mean,
yes,
is that
low density, low impact is one of our mantras for sure. And again, the system is designed so that we can you know, move the dial on the density without making a big dramatic announcement like we're somewhat seeing on the news. So those shifts are deeply data informed and deeply based on the information that we have and the conversations that we're having, you know, with health authorities and so on. And I might say the same thing about the residence halls. It's also lower density approach that we've had all along for the residence halls.
Yes, and so going back to kind of just having Ray with us, you know, the approach that we've taken, that you've taken as a leader, Ray, I think has also been similar to this. You know, across the whole university, we have tried to meet people in terms of what they want, but also imposing some real restrictions on them in order to keep them safe. So when I think about this one family at a time admissions tours, I mean, and you know, part of this is me wanting to say we're doing this in every area of the university. So Ray, when you decided to do that, you know, the approach of instead of having 8 or 9 families, having 1 family at a time, it changes the dynamic, but it also requires you to have more tours because you have to do it one at a time. So could you talk a little bit about, you know, maybe what you heard from families about that, you know, whether they, how they felt about going on these individual tours and what led you to that?
Yeah, you know, families have been incredibly responsive and positive and appreciative of the opportunity, and have complied with all of the face covering and other aspects. And I think everyone's adjusted to the feeling it's a little awkward having the admission counselor and the family sit at opposite ends of a long conference table to maintain some level of distancing. But some of the positive aspects out of it, separate from a group tour where you have to navigate multiple interests, I think one of the takeaways we've learned from this experience is when you are able to show an individual family around campus, you can really, and the tour guides have really customized the tour to the particular interests of that family. So I think for those families, while it's a different set of circumstances to visit, I think in an interesting way, it's been a much more engaging experience for them because it's been very customized and very focused, and a chance to really spend a little bit more time showing them the facilities and locations that they're most interested in. And so that would be one of the takeaways going forward for us in the when we get totally removed from a COVID-19 restriction environment, as how can we sort of retain some of those qualities in the future? Because I think that's been very beneficial for the families and has given them the ability to ask more questions and have a much more customized visit experience.
It's great. It's really great, Ray. And I'm, it's exciting for me, again, which I've said before, the interest that families have in visiting, in touring, in wanting to see our campus. It's a beautiful 400-acre campus. We have much to be proud of here. Any other things that you want to make sure, and again, we have a mixed, as you know well, audience, some current students, some students who are coming for the first time, and then many of our faculty and staff. Any thoughts that you want to make sure that they take away from your presentation that you want to kind of put an exclamation point behind?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would just emphasize that in moments like this, I've been at Lewis now nearly 20 years, and it's sort of moments like this just remind you of really who Lewis is. And I think part of why we're have been successful and are continuing to see success in working with the students is just because of the character and nature of this community and the care and concern we have for our students across all levels. And I think in moments like this, that really shines through. And so, we've been dealing with national projections, and people read, I'm sure, headlines from around the country and so many dire projections of dramatic reduction in student enrollment. And yet today we sit within 4 or 5% of our goal, when many of the prognosticators predicted 20-25% losses in enrollment. And when someone asks me, well, why is Lewis not seeing that kind of loss, I think it really is about what we've talked about this whole conversation. It's the work of the faculty, it's the work of the staff, it's the work of people in enrollment and across the university who have really gone above and beyond to continue that connection and communication with students and families. And it's made a difference. And I think it shows to families sort of the nature of who we are as an institution and what that overall experience each student is going to have as they decide to join us or continue with us.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ray. Really helpful. Chris, we've had a couple specific questions that have come in that you might want to address, because I know you were talking about the tracker earlier.
Yeah,
there was a question about the tracker, trying to get at specifics about how it actually is going to work.
Yeah, so quickly about that, the tracker emphasizes the current or the last week's total number. So it counts by week, but it also keeps all the historical weeks on the tracker, at least for the first 20 weeks or something, however long they fit on a screen. And so people can see the trend, but also add up the numbers. So all the cumulative weeks combined would be the cumulative number.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
It does. And that question was around that. Are you going to tell us total number of cases?
Oh, we're looking at it. There it is.
Yeah. And I guess I just want to point out with that when it comes to that issue, the cumulative cases are important, both in society and at Lewis, but they really are less important in some ways because people do move through. Many of them are actually asymptomatic. Some of them, face really significant health issues. But often after 2, 3, 4 weeks, they're going to be back in class and back on campus. And so it's really about how many current infections, people in isolation, people in quarantine that we're going to focus on more than, if we're sitting here in November, the number of cases that happened, the week of August 17th are not going to be, nor maybe are the total numbers. What's going to be important is, do we have 30 cases the week of November 10th or something like that? And we'll be keeping an eye on that.
Yeah, just kind of, the way we've kind of talked about it is that it's emphasizing the active environment around the cases. Although we want to be as transparent as possible, so even though we may not be looking closely at what happened 8 weeks ago, it'll be there for people to see, and to be able to kind of track trends on their own. I know, for one, I obsessively look at many trackers that are out there about our community and our country, so I know what it's.
Yes.
We're just adding another
layer, another
thing to look at every day,
right,
or every week in our case.
Any other of those questions that you want to address today? I know we'll be we're actually taking next week off, and then we'll be back that first week of September with another edition, and we'll have a lot more information about how the school year started, because that'll be the Thursday of the first week of classes. And we are also moving the time slot because we're going to be in session into the afternoon as opposed to the morning time slot. And people will get that information via an email as a reminder. Any other things that you want to address that, there's been a few questions that have come in?
I have several small things I want to say.
Yeah, please, good.
One is that we did get a question about the requirements around testing. So we haven't, I asked people to stay tuned about testing, but we have not changed any requirements around testing. So the question specifically was commuter students needing to be tested before coming to their first class that it meets on campus, and the answer to that is no, that is not required. The other thing I want to say is an eternal reminder to get the Lewis U app, or download the Lewis U app if you have not already done that. It is a great source of information, and it's also an elemental part of our contact tracing for people who do come to campus. There will be, as we've talked about before, the use of the app in order to check in different locations is really essential for us. So please download that app. I think that's all I wanted to say.
Well, can we just say that the other thing that's on the app is the Flyers Promise?
Right.
So I don't think we mentioned that again today, but we do want all of our students to read and acknowledge the Flyers Promise. It really is our attempt as a university to call on our best selves, to take care of each other through wearing face coverings, through washing our hands, using the stations that have been installed all over campus with hand sanitizers, to stay 6 feet apart, to exit the classrooms in a way that keeps people at that appropriate physical distance from each other. So there's a whole host of things that are in the Flyers Promise, but I think it boils down to, which we've said for the last couple weeks, it's about caring for each other. And to the extent that we can care for each other, take care of each other, it will allow us to continue to be delivering an education in a way that fits the circumstances of individual students. Going back to some of the initial questions that came in where we talked about, are we paying attention, and why are we in a hybrid model, much of this is about recognizing the power of in-person education, and certainly in some specific areas, so labs and clinicals and other places, and then other contexts in which having that face-to-face interaction is really valuable, and it's something that our students want. But at the same time, we recognize that we have moved to this model in which we're imposing all sorts of behavioral changes on people because we want to maintain the health and safety of our community. So I think the Flyers Promise is just a great thing, and I'm grateful. You kind of led the charge on that, and I'm really grateful for that we have it as a community and that so many people have signed up for it.
Yeah, and it reminds me, when I was listening to Ray talk at the end there, I also, I feel like the enrollment numbers and the way Ray just talked about, well, he said two things that I think relate to this. One is that it's been a time when we really, as an institution, have had to really think about who we are and what our mission is, what our core identity is and our traditions are, and that recognizing the power of in-person connection is a part of one of the things that we've been thinking so deeply about in the last weeks. The other thing is that it's emboldening, and I just feel the I don't know what the right word is, weight of the trust that families have in us as a university for, in particular, an excellent academic education. And the gratitude, the kind of model that I was talking about, we were talking about before, that requires our faculty to both be excellent online educators and excellent blended education teachers, and in some cases amazing lab teachers and amazing flight instructors and so on, all during the same semester. It's just extraordinary, and the work that they've done this summer to prepare to fulfill this promise that we're making about an excellent academic education is just really inspiring to me.
Yeah, it's been an inspiration to me as well, Chris. I couldn't say it better. I think that's in some sense a great note to end on. I don't know if there's anything else. I think what Chris just said about the power of our mission and the commitment of our colleagues across every discipline and every area really has been inspiring, I think, to all of us in leadership. And so we're grateful. And, I want to say as I close, I'm really excited that the next time that we come to you on Conversations from Stritch, students will be back on campus, and we're excited to have you. Certainly pay attention to all the emails and information that you're receiving. Check the website often in terms of things around move-in, your class schedule, all of those kinds of things, because though we only have 7 more days before the first day of class, there'll likely be notifications about different things that you want to pay attention to. And so please make sure that you check your email and check the website often. Many blessings to you and your family, and we look forward to seeing you on campus or having you have that really excellent educational experience in your online classes. Have a great start to the year, and we'll see you soon.